On today's episode of the Football Fellowship podcast, the Champions League is back. We have got a mega preview for you where we'll be taking a look at the biggest fixtures, what we think of the new format, and how that new Champions League table may shape up. We'll also be taking a look back at the Premier League action from the weekend, including Arsenal's 1-0 win over Tottenham in the North London derby, as well as looking forward to the next round of fixtures, where that red side of North London takes on the blue side of Manchester. Arsenal versus Manchester City in potentially a huge title clash. As always, make sure you stick around for the Football Fellowship quiz as well. Some more rounds of Guess the Club for you to play along at home.
Welcome back, everyone, and if you're fans of European football like we are on the podcast, then you'll be excited to see the return of the Champions League, especially with a new format and especially with some big games earlier on in the competition. However, before we get on to that, we've got to talk first about the Premier League and in particular Premier League managers. And what we're going to be talking about is now the 4 games into the season, I think we've seen a fair amount from these teams in the Premier League so far and how the managers want them to set up. So we're going to be giving you our early predictions on who we think is going to be sacked first. And first on the potential chopping block is Ange Postecoglou. A lot of noise surrounding Spurs and Ange after the North London derby in which they lost to Arsenal 1-0. And Toby, what have you made of Spurs' start of the season? 4 games in, only 4 points on the board. It's not been good enough, has it?
Yeah, in terms of, I think, results, it hasn't, and it's not where they would have wanted to be so far in the season, especially looking at the fixtures they've had. Leicester, Everton, Newcastle and Arsenal. It's quite a mixed bag of results, but I think they would have hoped for at least sort of 7 or 8 points at this stage of the season. So to be sitting on 4 and to be sitting where they are in the league, unfortunately just isn't good enough and definitely below expectations of what a lot of us thought going into this season. And it's difficult because I think in a few of those games at least, they have played well. They have dominated the ball. They have created a decent number of chances, maybe not high quality enough chances, and I think that's something that we'll touch on. But generally, it hasn't been awful. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say. I think, for Leicester, definitely were the better team for the first 60 minutes. Absolutely dominated, I think it's fair to say. And probably should have come away with, 3, maybe 4-1 win in that one. I think Everton at home maybe skews the whole results in the fixtures. I think just because the fact that Everton are so poor, and we'll come on to Everton and Shoreditch a little bit later on. But I think it's one where I think most teams would be expected to beat them, especially if you're in the top 6 and trying to compete for the Champions League this season. And I didn't think the Newcastle and Arsenal one, those are games in which you can lose. I don't think it's the end of the world if you do lose them. I think what's maybe more upsetting is the manner of those defeats. I think in the Newcastle one, I think they were by far the better team. And in the Arsenal one in the North London derby on the weekend, I think they definitely dominated possession. But then what they did with that possession really wasn't encouraging for a side whose strength is meant to be going forward. So I think not only is it the lack of points, and I also think it's the performances, the underwhelmingness in some of them, and then the not capitalising on others. I think it's a mixture of everything. And of course, it always doesn't help when you lose to your biggest rivals, does it?
Yeah, and especially in the manner that I think they lost, as you said. They dominated the ball. They kept the ball fairly comfortably for large portions of the game in Arsenal's half, but they just didn't do enough with it to create high quality chances. And I think the same could almost be said for the Newcastle game. It was fairly similar. I think they had a lot of shots in the Newcastle game, did dominate it, but unfortunately none of the chances were particularly high quality enough. And I think that chance creation is something that's definitely stuck out for Tottenham in these last 2 games, that when they have that ball, they are just moving it a little bit too slow, not looking for those quick combinations that I think we saw so much of last season, and where they looked so impressive and so dangerous was when we saw a large host of players in that Tottenham side combining really well. We saw Sarr bombing forward from deep. We saw Porro and Udogie darting into those sort of central areas when they were inverting, combining well with Maddison and Son. And when they moved that ball quickly, combining with all those players, it looked really good. And this season, I think things have just been a little slow in a few of those games. And on top of that as well, I think another big issue that we did see last season, something that we see other teams who play this style of play, looking at Arsenal and City, who play that high possession up against low blocks, they have a really good rest defence. They have a good way to prevent teams from being counter-attacking them. And I think looking at that Spurs-Newcastle game in particular, where Newcastle were able to get 2 goals against Spurs despite the fact they were dominating, I think again just shows that maybe Spurs' defensive setup for the way that they play definitely isn't effective enough at the moment.
Yeah, and I think what's worrying is the fact these are the same patterns that we saw last season as well. And if you think about, I mean, Spurs from set pieces are one of the worst sides in the league. We've known this for a while under Ange, and we've known this season as well. I mean, they've the one against Arsenal was the 18th set piece goal they conceded this calendar year. They've conceded 13 goals from corners this calendar year, which is the second highest in the league. And I just think really, if you're a side competing for the highest levels, then it's really not good enough. And I did think to myself, oh, even like set pieces, I think it's such a simple analysis, but I do think set pieces is an attitude. You need to have the right mentality to go, right, no matter what, we are not conceding here. And I think on the contrary, when you look at Arsenal, they love defending. They love defending set pieces, and they love scoring from them as well. And you think to yourself, the introduction of Nick Yover, is it, the Arsenal set piece coach, and Arsenal being the best team from scoring goals from set pieces, don't concede very many either. I do think like that's one area that's very simple for Spurs to fix, and it doesn't seem to be fixing it at the moment. Although I did look up and I didn't realize the Spurs actually hired a set piece coach over the summer, Nick Montgomery, I think his name is, and yeah, it looks like they are trying to address it and just trying to make things better, but it is just going to take a little bit of time. And only 4 games in, maybe we're not seeing everything that we'd like to see. We're not seeing the evolution of the Spurs side, but I think, 4 games in, I think we can see the potential. I think you probably want to see it a little bit quicker, because I think we were expecting Spurs to be a bit better this year.
Yeah, and in terms of, I guess, defending set pieces, I think that even looking at the personnel and the players that they have, a lot of players that are playing for Spurs, I think they're certainly sacrificed their defence in terms of their attack and what they bring to that attack and what they bring on the ball. I think when we look at Udogie and Porro, 2 players who you certainly wouldn't describe as particularly physical, 2 people who I don't think would really be those to step up from defending set pieces and corners. Even, I think, in terms of Van de Ven and Romero, both really good recovery defenders, both really good defenders on the ball when the ball's on the ground. But I think aerially, especially set pieces, they're still not the strongest. And when you look at that Spurs side, there's not too many that you'd really expect to sort of step up and lead and really control that box in terms of defending a set piece. So yeah, it seems that maybe it's not only a sacrifice in terms of tactics and of how they're playing, but also in terms of personnel. And maybe they could do with a few more players in the squad, not necessarily straight in the starting 11, but just around the squad as an option that are a little bit more physically imposing and can really step into that box and take charge.
Yeah, it's such a weird scenario for Spurs to be in, because under Nuno, Mourinho and Conte, they were all screaming out for more exciting attacking football. And now with Ange, it's almost flipped completely to the opposite, where you really want the side just to be a little bit more defensively solid at the back. And it doesn't seem like a weird one where you can't get something in the middle, because it does seem like the natural evolution from going really defensive, playing just trying to keep clean sheets, to is going gradually getting better at attacking football, and then to find a happy medium. But to flip completely the other side, I think, yeah, it's a very weird one. But I do think it's worthwhile sticking with Ange, because if you remember this time last season, everyone was saying, oh my God, thank God for some better football under this Spurs side, which is what Spurs fans were crying out for. So I think it is maybe perhaps a little bit too early for Ange. But another manager who we got to talk about is Sean Dyche. And 4 games in, an even worse record, 4 losses, only 4 goals scored, 13 conceded, sitting rock bottom of the Premier League table at the moment. And for a manager who we typically associate with being excellent defensively, Everton have been anything but that so far.
Yeah, this is an incredibly frustrating one, and especially the manner of the last 2 defeats, being 2-0 up against Bournemouth, and I think playing really well for 80 minutes of the game and completely falling apart at the end. And the same in the Aston Villa game. Really good, I think, plan. It all went to plan until half-time, 2-0 up. Looking at that second half, if it was Everton last season, I think we'd be pretty confident that they'd be able to hold on and win that game 2-0 or 2-1 even, and rely on that defence that was so exceptional last season, 5th best defence in the league last season. And now we're looking at 13 goals conceded in 4 games. Worst defence in the league. 2 games, as I just said, back-to-back, bottling a 2-0 lead. And it seems to have just completely flipped, I think, from the Everton that we saw at the end of last season. And a big part of that may be the fact that they're missing Jared Branthwaite, but I'm not sure if that's a little bit reductive to say that. Do you think that much else has changed at Everton, or does that just show how exceptional a defender Branthwaite was last season?
That's a good question. I think obviously Branthwaite being in the side would make a massive difference. And I think the partnership of Tarkowski and Branthwaite was an excellent one with Pickford just behind them, which one we complimented on several occasions regularly on the podcast last year. I think more so than Branthwaite being out, it's who's playing maybe. I think the fact that Michael Keane is coming in, and I think we saw in that Aston Villa game, the first one that Ollie Watkins scored to make it 2-1, Michael Keane gets completely outjumped for a defender who's 6'5", Ollie Watkins, 5'11", really good in the air, but not the tallest. I think you would expect Michael Keane to be a bit more demanding than that. But not only that, I think that the fullback issues are still an issue for them. I mean, you got like 38-year-old Ashley Cole as your first choice right back, and his backup is 34-year-old Seamus Coleman, club legend, obviously, without a shadow of a doubt. But still, he picks up too many injuries. He's not the quickest anymore, and one that you probably don't want to be starting week in, week out. And on the other side, Mikalenko gets injured. So I think that whole defense as a whole, when everyone isn't fully fit, that is a massive, massive worry. But not only that, I think even in front of them, I think Everton's midfield hasn't been as solid as it has been previously. I think maybe you could look at maybe Amadou Onana leaving and joining Aston Villa, funny enough, which I think he did all right in this game as well. Maybe conceded the first goal for Aston Villa, the one that Everton scored, McNeil. I think he gave away the ball too cheaply. But I do look at Timur Abunam, and I think he's a fantastic talent on the ball. He looks really good, really silky. Defensively, he is prone to switching off, which I noticed in just 4 games this season. I think it's been quite obvious, especially in the Bournemouth game where he didn't track his runners. But not only that, I think the wide players have been great at tracking back this season as well. Definitely going more and trying to be a bit more attacking, trying to score a few more goals, but forgetting the basics. But not only that, I think Ilman and Dye coming in has been good for the attack, but not necessarily as good for the defence, because I think Abdullah Doucouré away from him does offer some defensive solidarity that Everton desperately need. And all in all, I think it's just a case of everything is going wrong all at the same time. I think it is systematic. I think it is personnel, and I think also individual errors. I mean, you can't account for Harrison just kicking the ball to Ollie Watkins for Villa's second goal for the game on the weekend. And yeah, I just think it's a bit of everything at the moment, and Sean Dyche just absolutely cannot catch a break.
Yeah, especially like you say in terms of that Ndai change for Doucouré, it's almost trying to fix where their attack was lacking last season. And I'm not sure whether it was particularly their attack that was actually lacking last season, more so their chance conversion. I think they were creating a good enough amount of chances considering how little chances they were giving to the opposition. I think it was less about really changing the system and more just improving their efficiency in front of goal, I think would have been an appropriate fix. And I don't even particularly think that's replacing Calvert-Lewin or replacing any players. I think it is just one of those things that maybe needs to come from further training of those players or from just an increased confidence once they get a few like they have at the start of this season. Calvert-Lewin started the season really, really well. And maybe trying to overcompensate from correcting that attack has really diminished their defence. And it's a great point, I think, about the midfield and the wingers in front of them and sort of being able to track back. And I think replacing that midfield has not only let teams be able to run through that a little bit quicker, but has maybe also in turn hindered their attack in terms of how they're playing out of it in counter-attacking. And too much change too quickly, unfortunately, may have been a big problem for Everton.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just trying to look at this Everton side and trying to see how they can fix themselves. And I just think, just go back to what you were good at and trying to defend. And I do think that, Branthwaite coming back would be a huge help. I did also remember thinking to myself after watching the game that Tarkowski picked up a bit of an injury in pre-season. It was a back injury, and I did notice that in the Villa game. I did see him holding his back, and I was like, that's weird. Did he pick up a knock? And then I thought back to pre-season. I thought maybe he's not at 100% either. And I think that, knowing that you need to score at least 3 goals because you're going to concede 2 or 3 goals is absolutely absurd and no way for a football team to operate and be successful. Because I think as I was watching that Aston Villa game live, Everton went 2-0 up, and I just thought, there's no way Aston Villa don't score at least 2 here. So, yeah, I think it's quite obvious that Everton need to work on the defence. What I will say is the next 7 fixtures are so important for Everton. No points so far, but the next 7, Leicester away, Palace at home, Newcastle at home, the international break, and then you've got Ipswich away, Fulham at home, Southampton away, West Ham United away, and then it's the November international break. If there were to be a manager sacked, I am putting Sean Dyche somewhere near the top of my list, and I think that November international break, if after coming on the back of Ipswich, Fulham, Southampton, and West Ham, you don't get a decent chunk of points, I think, and I'm going to say it, I think he's going to be in trouble. How do you see it, Toby? Are you maybe giving a little bit more leeway, or are you on the same lines as me?
I think so far, I think he should maybe have a little bit of leeway, and I think what we saw last season will give him that as well. But I agree, I think those next fixtures are games where Everton do need to start picking up a decent amount of points, not only due to the nature of those fixtures, but to make up for the poor start and the points that they unfortunately lost themselves so far this season. So yeah, I think after sort of 10, 15 games, as you said, we will be able to see, I think, where Everton really are, and whether these first 4 games were a bit of bad luck or more to come. In terms of other managers who are sort of potentially looking a little bit in danger and towards the top of that list of who may be next to go, I think one who's most certainly probably up there at the moment, given that they're also on 0 points, is Russell Martin at Southampton.
Yeah, he's not got off to the best of starts, is it? 4 matches played, 19th in the table, 19th on goal difference, 0 points, only scored 1 goal, conceded 8 so far this season. And it's hard to talk about Southampton without talking about referring back to what we've already talked about, because of the fact that they're not great going forward, they're not great defensively. What are they good at? Clearly what they're really good at is keeping possession of the ball, because I think they're the second highest team with possession in the league so far this season, and first is Spurs, and they aren't doing much better either. So yeah, it's not been a good start. And I was watching that game against Man United, and for the first half an hour they did look much better. I do think that Russell Martin needed to bring the changes. He made 4 changes to that game. I thought the dribbling on that right hand side looked really good, running up against Dalot. He was the one who actually won the penalty against him, which unfortunately Archer missed. But up until then, I thought Southampton were okay, but they were okay. They need to be much better, and for doing it for the whole 90 minutes. I think if you're looking at a manager who is going to be sacked soon, I would maybe say him, but, and I'll throw this question to you, Toby, we were expecting Southampton to go down at the beginning of the season, so is it a bit harsh to say that, he's probably the manager who's going to be first to be sacked?
Yeah, I don't know about Southampton. I thought that they could have had a good start to the season. I think the way that they play, it could have given them like a good attacking start, and maybe sort of expectations of how Burnley were last season before Burnley actually played, and now it's sort of playing out the same, where they play good football, they play high possession football, but unfortunately it's just not cut out for the Premier League at the moment and the quality that they have. And I think for me, Martin could be one of the first ones to go, purely out of panic from Southampton, that unless he doesn't start changing and maybe start improving, I think it'll be one where they'll go, right, we need to get in a completely different style of manager whose sole purpose is to keep us up, as opposed to sort of sticking to this high possession, like more sort of attacking, I guess, style of play. So yeah, for me it probably would be Martin at the top at the moment. Not that I think he's a bad manager or that I think he should be sacked, but I think just given the circumstances that Southampton's only goal this season really is going to be to do everything to stay up. And yeah, looking at it at the moment, I could imagine a club looking at it and seeing that it's not the right sort of system at the moment. But I hope it works out, because it is exciting when teams come up and play good football.
Yeah, it absolutely is, but it doesn't seem like it's going well at the moment. And to finish off with Southampton, I'd just say that, remember last year when Sheffield United sacked Higginbottom and they brought in Chris Wilder? If Southampton are cut adrift by a little bit, and it's, maybe 10, 15 games into the season, any new manager coming in, they're not going to take the job. So I think the only reason why Southampton might be higher up on people's list, and I think maybe might even be first, I think definitely top 2 for Russell Martin being sacked first, is because they either have to stick with him for a period of time And if doing so, they might risk not getting a manager of the quality who is able to keep him up in the league. So they might end up panicking, like you said, Tobes, and firing him earlier on. And that's definitely an interesting situation where the higher ups at Sunderland will have to decide, do we go for him now or do we give him a bit more time? I think obviously you want to give him a bit more time, but it is the harsh reality of the Premier League and the finances involved. If you can stay up, then I think that whatever means that Sunderland can stay up, I think they'll try and do that. But should we talk about the other manager on the opposing side who ended up winning the game 3-0, which was Erik ten Hag. And now, 4 games, 10th in the league, not great, but 6 points, got a win now 3-0, 5 goals scored, 5 goals conceded, and a much better performance and something to look forward to for United fans.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was a good lineup as well. It was really nice to see that back four of Dalot, Martinez, De Ligt and Mazraoui all look like they're going to have a good season. I think if they can stay fit, there were some late substitutions in that game. Not sure how sort of injury related they were. We saw Eriksson step in alongside Kobbie Mainoo, later replaced by Ugarte, which was really good to see. And yeah, they just looked a lot better. They looked like they had a bit more sort of oomph about them, a bit more urgency about them. And I know it was against Southampton and against 10 men Southampton towards the end of the game, but yeah, definitely more positive signs for them, and I think that's certainly a result that Ten Hag would have wanted, and I think it's a really good confidence booster to be able to finish that game 3-0. Will be a massive thing for them to bounce back from that Liverpool defeat.
Yeah, absolutely. The only one thing which is, a little saying on is the fact that they play Southampton. Obviously, you can only beat the team in front of you, but they are one of the worst sides in the league. So I think the win will be taken with a pinch of salt. But if you didn't watch the game and you just look at the scoreline, you go, okay, that's a perfect response that Man United needed after losing to Liverpool, having the long international break, having to sit on that defeat, and now they can go in the next few games looking a little bit on the up. So that's definitely a positive for them and for Erik ten Hag, who I think just because of the nature of the job that he has coming, after all the failures of the previous managers, he, if anyone, might be given just a little bit more time just to see how it goes. Because I think Man United will probably end up in the top 8 somewhere. Where that is anyone's guess. But I think it's one where Ineos coming in, I think they probably will give Ten Hag time. So I think it looks like he's probably not going to be one of the favourites at the moment. All could change. We'll have to wait and see. But just some other managers. Gary O'Neill, 1 point for 4 games. Anything to worry about from his perspective?
Yeah, slow start for Wolves this season, and like we said, Everton, I think they're another side that we were looking forward to watching this season. That they played well last year, and when they had everyone fully fit, they looked really exciting. I think Pedro Neto's been a big loss for them in terms of creativity. Don't seem to quite have that same sort of bite going forward at the moment, especially with Hwang not being too involved so far. And I think that's someone they really need to get back into that starting 11 when they can. He brings really good pace, he's really direct, and he's a really good finisher as well, which I think is something that Wolves really appreciate when he plays, because they might not be creating the most chances in the world in how they set up. They don't particularly play with sort of a creative midfielder, a lot of their play coming from their wing backs. So yeah, it'd be good to get him back into the squad, but for me, I don't think Arena was going to be under too much pressure just yet. I don't think the expectation for Wolves is super high at the moment. Played really well with what he had last season. They have lost a big player in Pedro Neto, and yeah, I think he'll be given a lot more time, and I think he'll be given that confidence to be able to change things around and get them back on track a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you look at the fixtures as well. Arsenal, Chelsea, Newcastle, 3 teams are all going to be competing for the Champions League in the league this season. So I think, all 3 of those games, you can probably say if they get anything out of them, that's fine. They didn't, oh well. And I think Nottingham Forest away from home, who are looking a lot better side after beating Liverpool as well on the weekend. So 1 point getting away to them, I think it's a good result. And I think the fixtures will get easier for them as well. I think any notable mentions, maybe Oliver Glasner, Crystal Palace, I think we all expected them to do a little bit better. Only 2 points on the board so far this season. Obviously, you got the newly promoted managers of the other clubs of Steve Cooper for Leicester City and Kieran McKenna for Ipswich. But if we were to say maybe one manager who's going to get sacked first, I will personally say, I think Southampton. Because I think compared to all the rest, I think Russell Martin is probably the weakest manager in the league, and I think that Southampton may end up getting cut adrift. So I'm going to say him. Who are you going to go for, Toby?
Yeah, I think if I had to say one, it would be him, and it would be because of the situation that they're in, and obviously they are newly promoted. We see it so often. I do think all of the managers that we have mentioned, though, are definitely have the quality to be able to turn things around, and it'd be great to see them be able to do that, because they all are really high quality managers and across the whole league this season. So yeah, but unfortunately it probably would be Martin as well.
Yeah, well, there you have it, Southampton fans. We think Russell Martin is going to be sacked first. If any of you are watching, please let us know in the comments below. If he were to get sacked, who would you want instead? And do you think, what are your chances of staying up in the Premier League this season so far? We move on then to the Champions League, which is starting today as we're recording on the Tuesday. And firstly, Toby, I just want to get your thoughts on the new format. Obviously, 36 teams as opposed to 32. No more group stages. Now it's one big league table. What were your general thoughts about the whole thing? And are you looking forward to it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the Champions League. It's the Champions League. I'm always going to be looking forward to it, no matter what format or what changes they make, because it's always going to be good seeing the best teams in Europe come and play each other, and it's always so exciting, and it's great when your team's in it as well. The new format, I mean, I know why they've done it. It's to get more games and more money, obviously. I think some of their reasoning for it potentially is maybe seeing some more exciting clashes early on. Again, probably for money, but to try and be a little bit positive, I think that having 8 different opponents in the group stage is quite exciting. I mean, you don't get those group stage games where we're sort of playing the same team again and it might get similar results. I think maybe this new format of this massive league maybe eliminates those sort of 5th and 6th games in the group stage where it's already almost determined who is going to be going through, and they can be a little bit dead. But ultimately, for me, I think the real reason, obviously, they've done it is to get more money and to get more games. And I think the additional games is unfortunately just putting too much pressure on clubs and teams at the moment. And the calendar is so ridiculously stacked, and we're seeing so many injuries. And I think this is probably just going to make it worse. Sorry. And the little positives I mentioned, just I don't think are particularly necessary. So really trying to sort of try and see the positives, but I'm not too sure. What do you make of it? Are you feeling positive? Are you as pessimistic as I can be?
No, well, I'm actually going to be the opposite. I'm going to bring some positivity to this because I am excited. It's something new. It's something different. Whether if it's going to work or not, we'll have to wait and see. I completely agree with you, though. I will say on the pessimism about the more games is obviously being done for more money. But I think the format of it does bring something new and exciting and something that you can look forward to. I do want to see a different way of teams to try and compete for the Champions League. And I think this is something which I can kind of get behind. Obviously, yes, going from 6 games to 8 games is that itself is a little bit too much. And then going from 6 to 10, if you had to go through the playoffs to get into the last 16, that is way too much. However, I think where we are right now in September, before a ball's kicked in the Champions League, I will say I am excited because if you think about it, I think the teams, obviously the first 8, obviously go straight away to the last 16. But from 9 to 24th, you'll have to play in knockout games. And I think it actually gives a lot of the other teams who probably would finish 3rd or 4th in the Champions League a real good chance of qualifying and getting to the round of 16, which they normally wouldn't do. But not only that, I think that because of the league format, you're more likely to see upsets because, even teams who are in pot 1 will have to face 2 other sides in pot 1, which means that they could lose both of those sides. So I think Real Madrid at the moment are doing okay in La Liga. They're not top of the table, but they've got some tough games in the group as well. So they could end up losing a couple of games and finishing outside the top 8. So you could see a scenario where Real Madrid are in the knockout stages, in the playoff stages to get to the last 16 knockout stages. And that could be incredibly exciting because they could be playing who knows God what. And honestly, like teams like Aston Villa, who were probably in pot 4, they were going to get absolutely screwed if it is an old format and they had to play aside in pot 1, 2, and 3, and then realistically they'll probably get knocked out straight away. Aston Villa have a great chance of probably not making the top 8 considering the fixtures, but at least making the teams 9 to 24th, getting into that playoff places, and then making it to the last 16. So, if anything, yes, it's for money. Yes, there's more games, but I think it also at the same time gives the teams who probably wouldn't make it to the knockout stages of the Champions League an extra chance and more motivation to go for it because they've got a real chance of making it. So, yeah, it can be negative, but I'm choosing to be optimistic about it.
Yeah, and I think it is. I think it is a good change overall, and I like the idea of them changing because I do think the group stage can be quite boring at times, especially if you've got a group where it's a seed one, and then you've got low ranked sort of pot 2, 3, and 4 teams, and you've got teams getting 15, 18 points, easily getting through in first, and then it's sort of being a battle between potentially the other three. So yeah, I definitely think in terms of entertainment, it is going to be exciting. It is going to give those traditionally lower ranked teams in the Champions League more of a chance to get into it. And I think if they would have maybe kept it as the 32 league, maybe kept it at 6 games with then the playoff, and maybe 6 different opponents, I think that could have worked. Maybe pot one playing. I don't know. I don't know how it would work in terms of pots and things. Maybe they shuffle the pots around and make 6 pots or something. But yeah, I agree. I do think in terms of excitement, and I think especially from more of sort of a neutral aspect, in not only if your team's not in the Champions League, but looking at other teams in the Champions League, I think it's going to make it more exciting, and to have some big fixtures. I think in the sort of the new group table phase, I don't know what it's going to be called, but in terms of the group stage, having some bigger fixtures to start it off, I think is going to make the whole of the Champions League campaign really exciting, as opposed to sometimes it can feel like you're almost waiting for the knockout stages of the Champions League.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I mean, when I was looking at Liverpool's fixtures, I was like, oh god, we've got AC Milan on the first one, and then later on in like our, I think what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, on the fifth game you got Real Madrid at home. I was thinking some of the games that you're already getting, you wouldn't get Liverpool versus Real Madrid in the group stages or the old format. You also wouldn't get Arsenal versus PSG or Arsenal versus Inter Milan. You wouldn't get Manchester City versus Inter Milan. You wouldn't get Manchester City versus like the Juventus and PSG. I think there are some really exciting games here for us to look forward to. I will say the only thing is the fixture congestion, and maybe I would have liked to see the playoffs for the last 16 of the knockout stages. I would have liked to see maybe instead of a two-legged time, maybe a one-leg game where, sorry, a one-off game, no two legs, in a neutral ground where you can fill the stadium with 50-50 percent of the fans. And I think that would be what an intense game of football that would have been. Just one game to get into the last 16. I think that would have been really good to see. But I think more than anything else, I think I've just got to see it. I think we've always got to see how it plans out, because I think, yeah, we've talked about the positives, we've talked about the negatives. It's going to be really, really tough. And I think it's going to be a lot closer than a lot of people think as well, because this is just generally, and this is not an exact calculation, but you will need roughly 11 points enough to qualify for the knockouts in those 9 to 24 places. And you possibly could go as low as 9 points based if you have a good enough goal difference to get through. And generally, 16 points guarantees you an automatic place in the first 8 and into the last 16 of the Champions League. So a lot of teams are going to do a lot of work. And with the difficulty fixtures, I think it could be really, really close. But let's talk about the English sides in particular, because that's the ones that we're focusing on. Liverpool, Manchester City, Arsenal and Aston Villa. I'm going to ask you, Toby, which one do you think has the easiest fixtures?
I don't know whether they've got the easiest fixtures or just because they are the best team and fixtures look easy for them because of who they are, but I think it's probably Manchester City. Their pot one fixtures obviously being Inter and PSG. I think that Inter game is, for me, definitely the highlight fixture of this week. I think that is going to be such a good game, and I think Inter are going to give City some problems. They're really, really underrated, Inter. I don't think many people still particularly look at them as one of the strongest sides in Europe, but yeah, for me, they are going to be sort of top 4 favourites, I think, to win the whole thing. They looked so good last season in the Serie A, and I think they can carry it on into the Champions League this season. But yeah, City probably the easiest fixtures. Arsenal and Liverpool, a bit of a mixed bag, I think, probably. Not terrible, but not like super easy either. And Villa, I think for where Villa were in the pots, they've done okay as well. I don't think any of the English teams have a super tough draw. Who do you think's got the toughest, do you reckon?
The toughest. Despite the fact that Villa were in pot 4, I mean, when you think about some of the tough games that they do have, Bayern Munich, Juventus, they've got them at home. which is a really, really nice draw and a nice way for it to fall. And if you think about the away fixtures, they got Young Boys away, which have actually kicked off as we're recording this. They've also got Bologna at home, Club Bruges away, Leipzig away will be tough, Celtic at home. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to say I think actually Villa have the best fixtures on paper. Just because, and I'm giving them a little bit more here just because of the fact that they were in pot 4 and they could have been absolutely screwed. I actually think that maybe Liverpool have the hardest fixtures. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And I think that's fair to say, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's between Liverpool and Arsenal, isn't it?
Yeah, they're not like super difficult, but there are some tough ones in there, and I think getting by Leverkusen as your pot 2 team is a tough one. It is probably the fixture that I think most people wanted to avoid, with Leverkusen being in that pot 2.
I don't know. I tell you what, there's something about Xabi Alonso, who apparently declined the Liverpool managerial role, coming to Anfield and giving them a good spanking was not something that I would be against, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's going to be a great game. But at least Leverkusen have already lost in the league this season, so it might be a little bit easier than if it was last year.
Yeah, and not only that, Real Madrid have not started, in red hot form as everyone was expecting. But I do look at Arsenal. I think Atalanta away is going to be a really tough one. Obviously, they caught a lot of teams by surprise by winning the whole Europa League last season. I do also think, though, that you got some favourable home fixtures, Arsenal. I mean, Shakhtar away could have been a bit of a tricky one, but that's at home. Dynamo Zagreb also could have been a difficult away fixture. So you've got some nice ones at home and away. Oh, I tell you what, though, looking at it now, in game week 1, 2, 3, 4, Inter Milan away, that's going to be tough.
Yeah, that is a really, really tough one. I think we are going to struggle there, especially away. With our away fixtures, I think it was quite nice that they're all, well, for Arsenal anyway, and for our calendar, that none of the away fixtures, like you say, are sort of out far sort of stretches of Europe. They're all quite local, which I think makes a big difference, especially with how many games we've got this season. So, but yeah, that Inter away, I think, was one that we definitely wanted to avoid. So that's going to be our toughest game. We've also got PSG as our other pot 1 side, which I don't know how. It's so difficult to predict what PSG are going to be like, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they might be alright though, PSG. I think they started the season really, really well, and with manager Luis Enrique blooding in the youngsters. Who's that youngster they got it from? Barcola. He started the season in red hot form. So I think, I think PSG, thankfully, you've got them at home. That's going to be a tough one as well. I think, Manchester City have got PSG away in the penultimate game week, which I don't think is going to be easy. And I also think one thing that we need to mention is the fact that you've only got to play these teams once. You don't get a home and an away fixture, which means that clubs are going to have to do their due diligence before a match in so much detail, because they won't get a return leg to try and figure out, after the first leg, figure out how teams play. Second leg, okay, we know what you're about. It's one and done. That's it. So Liverpool will not be playing AC Milan again until maybe the last 16 if they get there. Man City will not be playing Inter Milan again. Arsenal will be playing Atalanta again. So I think that presents a new challenge in terms of scouting, in terms of data analysis, and in terms of preparation for the players, and from an analytical and tactical standpoint, which I don't actually think many people have talked about, because, once you play them, that's it. Your chance is over.
Yeah, it's going to make a huge difference, like you say, not having that returned fixture and not being able to sort of put into place any lessons you may have learned from that first fixture, which I quite like. I do like that there are different teams for every game. I think it makes it more exciting. It makes it feel like a sort of a single leg knockout game. Obviously it's not, but it does add a little bit more, I guess, pressure. This is your one chance to beat that team, and you've got to do it there and then, and you're not going to get another chance to do it again.
Yeah, it does feel more like a European tour, doesn't it?
Yeah, which is fun, and I think it is. I think that is a positive. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I didn't ask you about this beforehand, but I've actually got the teams who I think are going to finish in the top 8. Have you done anything similar in terms of predictions or anything?
I was going to, but I found it quite difficult to really sort of knuckle down 8. I had 4 that I think will definitely get into that top 8, and I've also got where I think maybe the English teams will finish. But yeah, let's hear your top 8. Let's hear it.
No, you give us your 4 and the English teams, and I'll give you my top 8 afterwards.
Yeah, well, I think my four is super obvious in Madrid, City, Bayern, and Barca. I've actually got. I think they've got pretty decent fixtures. They've started the season really, really well under Hansi Flick. And I'd also probably throw in there as well, looking at Inter. Like I said, I don't think they've got the easiest draw, but I think they look really strong. And then, again, I think Liverpool and Arsenal are probably going to be either in that top 8 or just below. So they would be the teams that, if I had to put forward a list, would be my most confident to get in that top 8.
Yeah, and to be fair, you just mentioned 7 teams, and I've got 7 of the 8 of them in my top 8. And the other 8th one, which you haven't mentioned, I've actually got PSG as well. So, yeah, I think it's pretty obvious on paper what teams we expect. But I think, so for me, I've got Real Madrid, Manchester City, Bayern Munich, Inter Milan, Liverpool, Arsenal, Barcelona, and PSG. But like you said, I mean, with the amount of fixtures, an injury crisis could really hurt one of these teams. If they end up having a shock result in which they were probably banking 3 points, didn't get them, and then they have to face another tough side, then that could really hamper one of them as well. Goal difference could be a factor. And so there's so many things to consider, and we've just got to wait and see how it all unfolds. Where did you get, in that case, Aston Villa? Because you didn't have them qualifying automatically, did you?
No, but I definitely think... I remember, I think I said last season before, I remembered that the format had changed, that I think Villa may struggle to get out of a group, especially given the likelihood of their sort of pot placement. But I think 9 to 24, looking at their draw, as you said, looking at the fixtures they do have, I definitely think they'll be getting a 9th to 24th. I'm not sure exactly where they'll be able to finish, but I think top 16 could honestly be a goal for Villa. I really, really do, especially under Emery, who we know is fantastic in European competitions. So yeah, I think that's obtainable for them.
Yeah, I completely agree with that for Aston Villa. I also think that the sides that I didn't mention, who are probably could maybe get there as well in the top 8, the likes of Juventus, Atletico Madrid, Borussia Dortmund, Bayer Leverkusen, obviously, which you mentioned. Atalanta could really upset a few people. I think Sporting, with Victor Gyökeres up front, are going a bit under the radar. And so I think, yeah, there are some really, really top sides, and we're going to have to really keep an eye on it, because I think it's going to happen all so quickly. And then we're constantly going to be looking at this league table going, oh my God, what implications does that result have for the table? Who's where? And I think it's going to be really fun to watch. So I think maybe come January, we'll be talking about the fatigue, too many matches, it's a disgrace. But I think for now, let's at least be positive for now.
Good idea. Let's try and stay positive until Arsenal have Saka, Odegaard all injured and we get knocked out and finish 25th.
Well, Odegaard's already injured, so you've got nothing to worry about there, mate, do you?
Well, yeah, true.
Yeah, but the thing you need to focus on now, Toby, is the quiz.
Hell yeah. So, yeah, quiz time. Guess the club. It's currently 8 points apiece. We are drawing after 3 rounds. Still a few more to play for, but yeah, we've done okay so far. Some decent performances so far in the quiz.
Yeah, I've been pretty happy so far. I won't say what I've been unhappy with, because people then go back and try and find it and then see my embarrassment and my shame, so let's not mention that. But if you don't know what we're talking about, we're doing Guess the Club, and you're going to get 5 guesses based on players who have previously or currently played for that club, and we're going to go from most obscure, so if you get the most obscure answer, you get 5 points, and then it'll go all the way down to the most obscure to the least obscure, the most obvious, and then the points will get gradually less the more and more guesses that you take. So 8 points apiece. Who wants to go first? I'm not really too fussed on this one.
I'm going to give you your list first, Mev, because
All
mine
right.
comes with a question. Do you want me to be tough or a little bit easier? Because I've got 6 names on this list.
It's weird you say that, because I've also got 6 names for yours. I think just played by ear.
Well, it depends on the first name, actually, is what it is. So
The first name. Don't tell me what you're going for, but just pick one. I really don't mind, Toby. How much do you want to shag me?
Okay. All right. I'll go for it. I'll go for what my heart is telling me, Mev.
Yeah. Okay. I'm
Your
ready.
first player for 5 points is Nigel de Jong.
Nigel de Jong, arguably a Barclaysman, as that trend is being around on Twitter and social media.
Yeah.
very well known for playing for Manchester City. Well, what a team that was. I think he was on the pitch when they won the league against QPR. He also played for, I think it was AC Milan. I don't think it was Inter. I see him in an Italian kit. I also see him in Spain, but I can't say where. Where was Nigel de Jong from? What country was he from? Was he Dutch? De Jong. Yeah, might be Dutch. Probably Dutch. Maybe Ajax? Question mark. I will say, because I don't want them on my radar for later in case it's an English club. I'm going to say from my first case, AC Milan.
It is not AC Milan, unfortunately.
Okay.
I think he might have played for them. Not too sure. Your second player for 4 points is Zlatan Ibrahimovic.
Zlatan. So I'm glad I didn't say AC Milan now. So Zlatan started off in somewhere in Sweden. He then went, I'm not sure if this is the right order, but he went to Ajax, Juve, Barca, PSG, AC, LA Galaxy, Man United. God, he's been everywhere. I probably missed, never in Germany. I probably missed a side. So I'm glad I said AC Milan. So it's not them. It could be Ajax. Didn't Nigel de Jong play for PSG, Barca? No, I'm gonna go for. Who am I gonna go for? I'm gonna go for Ajax.
It's not Ajax, unfortunately.
Okay.
Not sure if de Jong did. Yeah, Zlatan, he definitely did. Your third player for 3 points is Robbie Keane.
Robbie. Okay. So, Robbie Keane, Tottenham. He did play for LA Galaxy, didn't he? And so did Zlatan. Is it LA Galaxy?
It is LA Galaxy for 3 points. Well
Come
done,
on.
mate.
Oh,
That was
it.
it was the tough decision was I went for Nigel de Jong. I thought because Zlatan and Keane were quite sort of known for LA Galaxy, I thought I'd throw in him. No idea he played for them, and took out Chicharito Hernandez instead. Next two players would have been Ashley Cole and Steven Gerrard. So 3 points puts you up to 11.
Oh, thank you very much, Shane. I probably would have forgotten Ashley Cole played for them because I think like Arsenal, Chelsea, Roma, and then you forget what he did afterwards. But I think Steven Gerrard, obviously would have got it. But no, that was a good list. That was a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, throwing a cheeky bit of MLS.
Yeah, of course. Maybe doing that as well. But we'll have to wait and see. Are you ready for yours?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay. So, like I said, similar to you, I've got 6 players. So I'll see how you do as you go along, depending on if you're finding it difficult or easy. But your first player for 5 points is Thomas Kaminski.
Thomas Kaminski. Was he at Luton? Or have I just made that up? Pretty sure he was the Luton goalie. No idea where he was at before. Absolutely no idea. I'm not even sure where he's from, to be honest. It's probably a Football League club side or a Prem side. I don't know why I'm imagining him playing for a team with a stripy kit like Newcastle or West Brom or something. The first club that came to my head was West Brom, so let's go for them.
No, it is not West Brom, but I can tell you are thinking of the right player, the goalkeeper for Luton last year in the Premier League.
Okay, nice.
So your second one for 4 points is Tom Kearney.
Tom Kearney. So he's obviously at Fulham now. It's not going to be Fulham though. Tom Kearney, where was he before that? This is definitely going to be a Football League club. Tom Kearney. Another random team that just came to my head was Hull. I don't think he's ever played for Hull, but that came to my head. Tom Kearney, maybe he was at Derby? Derby feels better. I'm just literally just naming random teams. Let's go for Derby.
It is not Derby, unfortunately. Your third player for 3 points is Shane Duffy.
Shane Duffy. God, I'm struggling here. I know he was at Brighton. Beyond that, I'm not sure. So let's not waste any time and just go for Brighton.
No, it is not Brighton, fortunately.
Nope.
Okay, so this should help you out, this next one. Your fourth player is Brad Friedel.
Brad Friedel, bloody hell. So he obviously had Spurs, Blackburn, Villa. He also would have had potentially an MLS side, but not one I'm going to know. I don't think. Oh, could it be Spurs? I'm sure like maybe Tom Kearney did play for Spurs. Or maybe I'm just imagining him playing for Fulham in a white kit and it's similar. Shane Duffy. Oh, damn. Let's go for Blackburn.
And he's got it!
Yeah, nice.
There we go, Toby.
Nice. We'll take a 2-pointer.
Yeah, see, I thought you would have maybe got Tom Kaminski used to play for Blackburn, so I was a bit unsure for him because he signed from there for Luton, so it was a bit of a nerve-wracking one for me because
that
I was
like, a gamble, yeah.
Yeah, it was a gamble. But then yeah, all the others, Tom Kenny, 1 season, 14-15 before joining Fulham. So if you knew that Tom Kenny was at Blackburn, you would have known that he's been nowhere else before then. Shane Duffy in 14-16 before joining Brighton, so there was nowhere in between that as well. So it is a lot of gambles if you knew one of them, but you didn't. And obviously,
need to know my transfer, the changing of the teams. That's what it is, isn't it? So
yeah, and then Brad Friedel for 2, who obviously only played for Brøndby, Galatasaray, Columbus Crew, and then obviously Liverpool, Blackburn, Villa, and Tottenham Hotspur. And the last one, a proper Barclaysman, David Dunn.
Nice. I thought you were going to say Roque Santa Cruz at the end when you said a Barclaysman.
Yeah, could have done. A Blackburn, a proper Barclays team, weren't they? A couple of players as well. Who did they have at centre back? Was it
Chris Samba?
Chris Samba, that was it.
What a man! What was he? Blackburn, QPR, Angie Machakala, the one that Semileta went to, and then back to QPR. I think. Unbelievable career.
Unbelievable career. Yeah, Blackburn. They were a great team. We need them back in the Premier League sometime soon.
They always used to beat us though. We always used to have trouble against Blackburn, Arsenal.
Yeah, I remember a very distinctive game where Liverpool beat them 3-2, and I think Andy Carroll got 2 goals. But it was one where they were trying to get Franco De Santo fit for them up top, and because he had hamstrings made out of cheese, he was constantly just on the sidelines with his Peloton bike trying to warm up his hamstrings, and then he would finally come on, and then obviously inevitably he would score, but thankfully he didn't for us on that day, thanks to Andy Carroll and Maxi Rodriguez.
Oh, Maxi Rodriguez, that's a cult player.
Yeah. Oh, the days. Him, Raul Morales, Charlie Adam, what a midfield.
What a squad.
What a squad. No wonder we were awful back then. Oh, dear. But speaking of sides who aren't awful are Manchester City, who, are under a little bit of controversy at the moment because the hearing for their 115 charges started on Monday. And at the moment, we don't really know anything apart from it started. So really, I think the best way to talk about this is, what would you like to see happen, Toby?
This is a really tough question because we don't really know what they've done or how much they've done. Looking at the majority of their charges, I think it's 89 charges are a combination of failure to provide accurate financial information and failure to cooperate with the Premier League investigation itself. So for me, they obviously aren't the serious charges. I think the main there's 12 charges, which I think are the key ones, which are 5 of failure to comply with UEFA's financial fair play rules, which were from 2013 to 2018, and 7 charges of breaking Premier League PSR rules, which was between 2015 and 2018. And those are the key ones. And I think if they are found guilty of those in that period, looking at the punishment we have seen for Everton and Forest, considering they were 1 charge each and they had points deductions of around 6 points each time, looking at 12 potential charges, I don't know whether they'll be sort of delivered in one season, which will effectively relegate Manchester City, you would expect, or whether they would put an even more severe charge, like expulsion from the league or whatever. I'm not too sure. I think it just, as long as what they are found guilty of, as long as the punishment is equivalent to what we've already seen in the league this season, that for me is key. And I think that's what is needed to show that there's fair treatment for all of the teams in the league. And no matter when these charges are coming from, the action is inevitably delivered. Because obviously these are from 10 years ago and there was no punishment back then.
Yeah, and not only that, sorry, we should probably clarify if they are guilty of any of them, which if you got 115, you probably, at least one, you think, even just delaying providing information. But yeah, it's such an interesting one because from a football perspective, I think everyone, even Pep Guardiola said it himself, even he wants this hearing to be started and finished really, really quickly, because I think we all just want to find the resolution to it, because it's been this like dark cloud over Manchester City and the whole Premier League forever, because it's always a constant of, oh, Man City are amazing. Yeah, but 115 charges. And so we really just want to know either way, like if this team is the best ever that we have seen, that they've done it fairly and we can give them the flowers wholeheartedly and we can just move on with their lives. But if they have been found guilty, then whether it's retrospective action or if it's action now that can influence them and in the future, whatever it may be, I think we all just need to get on with our lives. And I think that's what I think everyone's most excited about getting the hearing. Even if, well, I was about to say even if Manchester City aren't found guilty, but in a lot of people's minds, I think even if Manchester City were to be found not guilty of all charges, I think they would still be guilty in people's heads, because they say, oh, you just found some sort of loophole, or oh, you paid off the judges or whatever. I think it's a really weird one because it's obviously innocent till proven guilty. But I think in everyone's head, even if Man City were to be found innocent, everyone would look at them as if they were guilty. It's such a weird position for Man City to be in, where really I don't think there's a win-win in this situation.
Yeah, I was literally just about to say the same thing and ask you, how do you think it will affect Manchester City's legacy either way? I think internally, obviously, they want to be found not guilty. And I think all of the stuff in terms of the sort of comments we'll see from rival fans, from rival clubs, in terms of that question mark and that, yeah, maybe they have found a loophole, maybe they still should have been found guilty, I don't think really matters to Manchester City, and there's not really much more that can be done. If they're found not guilty, we have to believe it. I think just the way that Manchester City is, and in terms of the money they have, the ownership they have, the investment that's been put into the club, I think does unfortunately just come with those sort of question marks that, like people saying, oh, they haven't earned it, they've just paid their way to do this, they're paying their way to be not guilty, blah, 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 blah. And I'm sure we'll see it with Newcastle over the coming seasons, when their investment inevitably goes up in line with PSR, and maybe they'll have potential question marks over their head of future things in their spending and stuff like that. So it's difficult. I don't know if they will be found guilty. I'd be quite surprised if they're found guilty for a lot of them and are given a big punishment, because I think the amount of money that Manchester City have, the amount of lawyers they're able to pay, and the amount that they've sort of got set up behind the scenes, I don't think they will have made mistakes in terms of spending and following the rules and things. I think it'd be crazy if they even allowed that to happen. So it would be quite surprising, I think, for me. But I guess if this is going to a hearing as big as this, there must be a decent amount of evidence potentially. So yeah, really, really weird one, really difficult one. And like you say, once we get that verdict, it will be nice to sort of to know then, and then I think be able to talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think this thought just came to me just now as well, is that let's say this was Chelsea under Todd Bowley's new era, spending all the money that they've spent. If they were, had 150 charges next to their name, I don't think as many people would care. I think the issue that Man City have had, and obviously as you know, as a sport and trying to be competitive, they wanted to be successful, and in doing so, they have been incredibly successful. To the point where Liverpool with 97 points haven't won the league, Liverpool with 92 points haven't won the league, Arsenal on two occasions, back-to-back seasons, haven't won the league, and so I think it's everyone else looking at themselves and going, God, we're not good enough. But if they hadn't won the league, hadn't had as much success as they've had, I think everyone would be looking at them going, oh, we don't really care about the outcome as long as they get charged appropriately. And if they get found innocent, okay, fine, whatever. It's because they've been successful that I think all rival fans look at themselves thinking, God, surely it can't all be going right. They must be doing something underhandedly. They must be doing something against the rules because no one can be this good. But imagine if they were found not guilty, and then we'd all have to accept it, and we'd go, "Oh God, Man City are this good, and they did it all by the rules." I think for the psychology of all the other Premier League fans and teams competing for the Premier League, I think that would be a massive hammer blow to go, yeah, do you know what? Fair enough. You've got to hold up your hands and just say, I cannot wait for the day that Pep Guardiola leaves. I cannot wait for the day that all these top players leave, because if you're this good and you haven't broken any rules, then none of us stand any chance whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think that actually leads on to our sort of next topic we wanted to discuss quite well, in terms of the man at Manchester City, Erling Haaland, and his ridiculous goal scoring rate and numbers. And I think maybe the conjecture that Haaland is only so good because he plays for Manchester City, he plays for the best side in the world, he plays for a side that creates so many chances. Oh, if you had Big Dave down the pub up front for Man City, he'd score 30 goals a season. And I'm hoping in terms of Haaland that we get to the point where that stops and we just realise how stupidly good he is.
Mate, what has Big Dave ever done to you? Leave him alone. But no, I do know what you mean. I mean, 9 goals in 4 games. It's absolutely absurd. I mean, it's absurd that I don't have him in my fantasy football team still. I mean, no wonder I'm bottom of the league at the moment. I thoroughly deserve to be, because after having a whole summer off, coming into the season fresh, how did we not expect anything other than Erling Haaland to hit the ground running, knowing the quality of striker that he is? But I just think that, I think, like I said about Man City's charges, because they're so good, you want something to be wrong with them. But I think the same for Erling Haaland. He is just so good. We just need to accept that this is him. This is his level. He makes the rest of the league look a bit rubbish. He is just head and shoulders above everyone else. And yeah, 9 goals in 4 games. It's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, the next highest goal scorer is like about, I think, 6 or 7 players on 3 each. So he's already on course to win the Golden Boot. He probably already will win the Golden Boot. I mean, if he stays for long enough, he'll break Alan Shearer's goal scoring record in a few seasons before he's probably even 30. And he'll have all the records. And we'll be talking about him as the greatest finisher, not only the Premier League, but the world has ever seen. He simply is phenomenal. And I don't think there's any weakness in his game. I mean, you're a four player. Do you think there's anything that he doesn't have?
No, but even if he did, if people say, oh, maybe his link-up play is not as good as some other elite players like Kylian Mbappe or Harry Kane, for example, it doesn't really matter. He's not in the side to do that. He's not in a system that requires him to do that. He doesn't really get much opportunity to show that. He is a player who's getting 20 to 30 touches a game, and that's what he's there to do, and that's what he does best. So I think when your strengths are so strong, and as long as you're not in a system that relies on any of your weaknesses, it doesn't matter, because he's just so good at putting the ball in the back of the net, and that's exactly what he's there to do.
Yeah, but just not only that, I think he's so underrated off the ball as well, because you don't normally see it because Man City are building up from the back, but his runs off the ball to run in behind, to try and make himself an option, to bring that opposition defence, to drag him further back and get them deeper and deeper, which allows the rest of the team to have more space on the ball as well. I think you don't often see that, and I think that's incredibly underrated as well, so his understanding of the game is at such a high level. And I think that really the only two options that you have is either you stop Erling Haaland or you stop the service to him from the other Man City players. But when you've also got the quality of players around him as well, I mean, you can try and stop one, but someone else is going to punish you. So I think it's a pretty difficult feat for anyone to try and stop him.
Yeah, and I've just got a load of stats that I just want to give now that I think really highlights that even if you stop those other players in the Manchester City squad, his movement and the way that he plays is so good. It doesn't really matter, and he doesn't need many chances. I mean, as we said at the moment, he's averaging over 2 goals a game at the moment. If he carries on at this rate for the whole Prem season, he'll have 85 goals by the end. So people say he gets loads of chances. At the moment, he's sitting on an XG of 4.8. He's scored 9 goals already. He's already overperforming his XG by almost 5. Looking at his time back in Dortmund, when people say he's only good because he plays for Manchester City, he was averaging over a goal every 90 minutes there. 13 goals, 27 goals, and 22 goals across 3 seasons there at Dortmund. And I think what shows how good he is how many shots he's able to get away a game as well. The space he makes for himself. 5 shots per game already so far this season. 3.5 shots on target per game so far this season. And comparing that to other elite players, especially Harry Kane, who I think is someone that we know is someone who's really, really good at making space for themselves. Haaland at the moment is as well averaging goals per shot on target at 0.5, goals per shot overall at 0.3, which again is better than Harry Kane. Just ridiculous numbers, and still so young. Still so many years ahead of him, where strikers get older and older, they get even better, get more experienced, get a better reading of the game, and it's probably going to be he's somehow going to get even better. It is just mental.
So how are Arsenal going to stop him on the Sunday then, Toby? What are they going to do?
I didn't want to be asked that question. I want to ask you that question, Mev, because I don't want to answer it.
Well, you just given him the big build-up, so I just thought, you know what, after all of that, go on, give us a solution.
The only thing I can think is that last season we were able to do it. Our defence was able to stop Haaland. I think he had two shots off target, 2 shots blocked, so he still was able to get away 4 shots, despite the fact that our clear objective was to completely suffocate him and really rely on Gabriel and Saliba to do their job and prevent him from getting much. And that was enough. That was enough to get a clean sheet at the Etihad and keep Haaland quiet. And to be honest, I think it's going to be the same game plan again. Sit back, absorb the pressure, hit Manchester City with balls through high and wide where their sort of area that you can expose is. Try and hit Saka and Martinelli. Have Rice come back into the side, sit in front of that defence. Try and stop Kevin De Bruyne. Try and stop Bernardo Silva. Try and stop Rodri. Try and stop those players from playing through the middle. Force Man City wide. Suffocate the box. Hit long. Rely on corners and counter-attacks. And it got us a point last season, and if it can get us one again, I'll take it.
Yeah, well, I can't remember exactly. You might have to help me here. Was there a narrative going around last season that Haaland couldn't do it against the big sides? Because I don't think he scored against Arsenal in the 2 games, and I don't think he scored against Liverpool in the 2 games. Does that sound right to you?
I've got a feeling, did he get a goal at the Emirates? He has scored at the Emirates. Whether that was last season, I can't remember.
No,
but yeah,
I think that was 2 years ago.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if that was a narrative. He does struggle in the bigger games.
Yeah, because I can definitely remember him running at Virgil van Dijk, and everyone saying, "Oh, Haaland's nothing," and I'm like, "Yeah, he's still pretty good." So yeah, I mean, clearly it's a lot easier for him against opposition which is weaker, but that's the same for anyone. And I think in this game against Arsenal, I do think, like you said, you are going to sit back and. I just wanted to pick up on something you said about the team lineups, because obviously Declan Rice is going to come in, and that's going to be huge. Not blow. What's the opposite of blow? Words. Yes, that's going to be a huge gain for you. Yeah. In terms of who's going to replace Martin Odegaard, it was kind of Trossard in the game against the North London derby. Is it going to be Trossard again? Do you reckon?
I think so. I do think so. I think Rice will probably come in for Jorginho. I think would make the most sense. I don't think we'll require Jorginho in terms of sort of maintaining high numbers of possession. I think it'll be quicker, and I think Partey was that sort of play maybe you want for someone who can turn and then just distribute it really quickly, whilst also having decent defensive numbers as well. So yeah, I think Rice will probably come in for that, but also I wouldn't be surprised if we also saw Rice, Jorginho and Partey. I think potentially players a really defensive 3 Yeah, I think it would be nice to see Trossard play in that role because I think it suits him. Yeah, not too sure. Not too sure. I'm intrigued. We'll definitely, I think, see Havertz playing up front, using him as an outlet, and I think it'd be good to see Martinelli on the left wing. He's actually a really good defender at tracking back, and he puts in a lot of work. And I think having him as an outlet for his pace will be pretty important. So, yeah, either Trossard or Jorginho, I think, being that third man in the midfield.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, why I don't see a midfield three of Partey, Jorginho, and Rice is the way you'll probably defend off the ball. You probably do what you have done and play a 4-4-2 off the ball, and you try and create a box in front of their back four using the two most advanced forward players in the middle, Havertz and one more, and then would you probably expect to be Partey and Rice. So if you have Partey and Jorginho, that means Rice would have to defend alongside Kai Havertz, or maybe Arteta would try and defend in as three in more like a 4 and a 5. But I think that what's worked for him so well is that 4-4-2 out of possession. So I think it probably will be a more attacking player. It could be Havertz and Jesus. It could be Havertz and Trossard, Havertz and Martinelli. I think Havertz is definitely one player is going to be starting. I think the fact that he started up front for Arsenal in the North London derby rather than midfield when you had major deficiencies, I think shows the fact that I think despite the fact that he's probably brought in as a midfielder, I think Mikel Arteta definitely sees him now, especially as a crucial part of that front line, not just a singular part as well. And so, yeah, I think it probably will be Trossard instead of Odegaard. I think that in terms of down the left-hand side, I think you probably do need the pace of Martinelli. But I think if who's probably going to play on the right-hand side, I think it's probably going to be Kyle Walker because he's going to try and nullify the pace of Martinelli. I do think a player like Leandro Trossard on the left-hand side will get more change out of Walker because he's a bit more trickier and more smart with his play and positioning. Whereas Martinelli, I think, is more just raw pace, which I think Walker can probably deal with. But he did struggle against Nico Williams in the Euros final for Spain, so who knows how it's going to go. But I would like to see Trossard, but I think because of Odegaard not in the middle, Trossard will probably play in the middle as well. But I think it's really, really fascinating. And did I hear you right say you take a draw?
Yeah, I think I would. Man City away. I think at the Emirates we can try and be a bit more expansive and certainly push more to get a win. I think we can keep the ball a lot more, and we are good enough to dominate Manchester City and beat them. I think especially this season. I think the way we are going to set up and the way we are going to play, it will feel like a hard fought point, which I think is also quite important in terms of not sort of being unlucky and getting a draw as in terms of earning it. So yeah, I think it will hopefully be sort of 0-0, 1-0 Arsenal. I think is as expected and realistic. And unfortunately, I think when you go to the Etihad, you kind of have to do that sometimes. Whether we'll do it, I'm not sure. Who would you put your money on getting the win, or do you reckon it could be a draw as well?
I mean, I think a draw is probably what's going to happen, if I were to guess. I do think that, like we said, Arsenal are going to sit back, going to defend, try and hit the counter-attack, set pieces, corners. That'll be their game plan. And I think actually that's the right game plan to go with. I know a lot of people will say, well, they lost the league last season because they didn't go to Man City and win the game. Well, I think the issue Arsenal had was before even going to that game, they were trailing Manchester City. So they actually needed to be ahead of them going into that game and then draw with the correct result and the performance. I think this time, because of context, it's early on in the season. It's just the fifth game. In the second, if you think about it as a two legs, in the second leg, Arsenal will be at home later on in the season in the run-in, and that's where they have to go for the win in that second game. But I think this one, considering the fact they've already dropped points at Brighton, thankfully got the win in North London derby, because I think dropping points in against Spurs as well and then going to the Etihad, that would have, I think the fan base might have been in a little bit of meltdown. But I think now a draw would be not ideal, but a draw, you definitely take that. And a win obviously would be perfect, but if that's going to happen against a strong Man City side who have started the season really well, I don't think so. So I'm probably going to go with if a team is going to win, I think it's going to be Manchester City. But I think the most likely result is going to be a draw, just because I think that Arteta, being the way he is, I think he isn't Pep. He will be pragmatic in some games and he will take a point, and I think this is the right game to do it in. So for me, I think it's a draw, and if a team is going to win, it's going to be Manchester City. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I do think I think we're going to be able to keep a clean sheet, but it's going to be really difficult. And it's going to be a really difficult watch as well because Manchester City are relentless. I think if we can just play as we did last time, because even last time out in that 0-0 draw, we had a really good chance through Trossard. I think Saka had a decent chance as well, where he maybe could have got a better shot off. We do have those set pieces. If we can win high free kicks and corners, we can punish any team. And yeah, it's going to be really difficult. Oh God, I'm just getting nervous talking about it now. It's such a massive game, and it has been for the last couple of seasons. But yeah, I'm gonna back a draw, but I'm also going to be very cautious that I think if City get an early goal, especially, I think they will go on to win it. If they get a goal in that first half, even, I think it's going to be City's game to win 100%.
I would actually really like to see that. I would like to see Manchester City get an early goal and just see how are Arsenal and Arteta going to respond. Because I think coming into the game, I think we all expect Arsenal to play a certain way with a certain lineup, and we all know what the game plan is going to be. But what happens and how quickly can you adapt when the game plan gets thrown out the window? That's what I would really like to see, and I think that would be the true test of what kind of manager is Arteta. Not having a game plan before the game goes in, everything goes really well, and according to it, that's one thing. But being able to adapt and change, I think that's something else. And I think that not only would that be a good game, that'd be good to see from Arsenal's tactical perspective, I think it'd also be good for the neutral, because I think everyone expects to go one way, and if Arteta doesn't go that way, then I think everyone will, and it doesn't go that way, and then they lose. I think everyone will say, "Oh, you should have played more defensive. You should have done what you're good at." So, I think it's going to be a really interesting one tactically. I think it's not going to be a great watch for the neutral. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same. In terms of from an entertainment perspective, I think a City early goal would be the best thing, and see how Arteta can respond. 'Cause I think 2 seasons ago in that in the season where we weren't expecting it to start to be in that title race, we had a lot of games where we came back late on. We made really positive subs. We really went at games towards the end of the 90. Whereas last season, I think Arteta had found his formula and found the strengths in the Arsenal side are actually in that defence. And I think, as you said, has sort of taken more time setting up before games as opposed to really maybe having to react because we have been so well set up before. So yeah, I think it's something that we definitely, as Arsenal fans, want to see in this season in terms of how we can react and change games. Do I want that to happen at the weekend? No, because our bench doesn't look particularly strong, and as I've said, our strength is definitely in that defence and how we can set up looking at the whole 90 as opposed to potentially relying on a plan B. So yeah, Mourinho, park the bus ball, get it at the Etihad and scrape a 3 points if we can. If not, settle for a nice 0-0 again.
Yeah, absolutely. But final thought before we finish. I just had this in my head. Because if we can predict what we think Arteta's going to do, then surely Pep can do that as well. Does he throw a curveball? Does he do something different in this game?
I think maybe the Pep of 4 or 5 years ago at City would have done. I think that cost them a lot in the Champions League, especially, is where Pep was focused so much on changing his system and his style of play and his lineups to try and get the better of oppositions. Whereas I think Pep in recent years has really stuck with his system and not adapted it too much dependent on opposition. I think that's actually been better for them. So I think Pep probably should just stick to his guns. In terms of how they're playing this season, maybe look at last season's game as a way to maybe try and break down a little bit more. But I think on their day, Manchester City don't particularly need to adapt too much to opposition. I think the only thing is maybe how can they get the better of Gabriel and Saliba? How can they maybe play a little less directly to get that ball into the box and maybe have to rely a little bit more from sort of shots from distance, which I think is potentially something they could have worked on. But yeah, besides that, I'm not too sure. What do you reckon?
I think the one thing that I looked at from the Spurs game, which I thought was quite interesting, was normally when you have your wide players out on the touchline, you normally double up in terms of defenders on them. But Ben White and Timber were just one-on-one defending against Heung-min Son and Brennan Johnson, which I thought was really interesting. And so well, depending on what side it was, Thomas Partey was then going out and marking the midfielder who's coming closest to get the ball off them, and Jorginho was doing the same on the other side as well. And I just think that with the quality of wingers that Manchester City have, Grealish, Doku, Savinho, if they decide that they're going to take on their man, they could get potentially some success out of it, because Ben White was solid in the game against Spurs, but I don't think he was excellent. I think there were a couple of moments that Heung-min Son of even 2 years ago, I think, rinses him and maybe gets a shot away or creates a chance. So, yeah, I do think that's one key area if they're going to double up on the wingers, because Man City have got so many quality players at 1v1. I think this is the exact kind of situation in what Savinho has been brought in to do. Doku one side, Savinho the other. It's a very tight game. Can you work an angle? Can you find a bit of space? Can you beat your man? Because if they can do that, then I think that getting away from them, yes, you still have Gabriel and Saliba and then David Ray in goal as well. But if they can beat their fullbacks, I think that's going to be where this game is going to be won and lost, in the fullback areas for me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you can beat your fullback once and get one good ball into the box into Haaland, if it's a good enough ball, he is probably going to get on the end of it and be able to get a shot on target, and that's exactly what they want. So yeah, that's a good point, and definitely one I'll be keeping an eye on in the game on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think we're almost talking about the game too much before the game's even happened. So I think that is a very good place to leave it. There you go, everyone. That's this week's episode of the Football Fellowship podcast, talking about the managers we think we're going to get sacked first, talking about the Champions League, the quiz as usual, and everything to do with Manchester City and also in the game coming up. And if you want to see probably our reactions to it, because that's probably going to be a big game that's going to dominate all the headlines, well then make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Football Fellowship podcast, and make sure you follow us on Spotify as well, where we'll be posting every single week over the course of the Premier League season. From me and Toby, thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you in the next one.